How you doing? It's Frank. Good afternoon, Friday afternoon. I'm down on Whitstable seafront. It's quite nice. That was Sheppey, you can see in the distance over there. I was interviewing a lovely lady called Nicola Lutz Collier earlier on, and during our conversation, which was fantastic, I reminded myself about something that happened in class a few years ago when we were doing Great Expectations. Fantastic book, everybody knows it. And I've been struggling with it. I'd done it many times before, but there was a point about Satis house where Miss Havisham lives that I was kind of struggling about. I was turning it over in my head, couldn't quite get it. And then we went to class, and in the process of having a discussion, someone said something about, well, Pip's never really satisfied in the end. And I suddenly realised that this was in my head, satisfaction and Satis house. And I thought, wow, was Dickens playing a little game there? You know, Pip wants what Satis house has, and he never quite gets it. And from that, suddenly I had this little epiphany while I was in the middle of the class that when Pip's young, he kind of aspires to be a gentleman, and he kind of takes on the idea of being a gentleman that the world gives him. Like we're born into a world that already exists. We don't really get to decide the meanings of words when we're young, so we take them on. And it's really interesting. So Pip wants to be a gentleman, and then Magwitch becomes his benefactor and turns him into a gentleman by giving him money. And what's really interesting is that what Pip thinks a gentleman is, the definition that he kind of works with from the world, doesn't turn out to be what a gentleman really is. He meets this guy, he comes across this guy called Bentley Drummle, and Bentley Drummel's a horrible pig, but he's a gentleman. I mean, in what way was he ever a gentleman in the way Pip meant it? And I had this little epiphany in the middle of class. I'm going to walk down to this jetty I'm kind of down by the sea. I had this little epiphany right in the middle of class that maybe that's what we're all doing. We were there, people were commenting on this book, this well-known and well-loved book. And I had this little minor epiphany for myself, thinking, well, that's maybe what we have to do as we go through the world, as we get older and we get experience. We have to translate the world into our own language. We get these concepts and these words given to us by our parents and our schools and our friends and everything. Well, I've got to be careful not to walk too far or get wet. And maybe what we need to do is maybe the process, maybe it's nothing we can really control, but maybe the process is just learning that the words you get and the concepts you get, don't necessarily mean a fixed thing, and you have to understand them in your own way. This is a fantastic revelation for me. I was in my mid-40s, I'd done this book countless times, and this fantastically lively conversation between 4 or 5 people had led to this little insight that I had, from a book that a man wrote 160 years ago. It was quite a fascinating thing, and I've thought about that a lot, and it came up, in the middle of the conversation with Nicola today. Nicola was talking about expectations. Interestingly, I didn't even think about that. That's hilarious. She was talking about the expectations that we grow into, that we have put on us by our families, not necessarily, not in a mean way, but just, people expect things of you as you go through your life. And she was talking about this, and this came to me. It reminded me of this moment in class when I had this kind of realization, and satisfaction and Satis house linked up. And then within seconds I was thinking about Pip, and it's like, wow, he's not satisfied because he doesn't ever really understand that being a gentleman can be what he is, which is a decent person. Joe Gargery, interestingly, is not a gentleman in the way the Victorians meant it, but is the most gentlemanly person you could ever meet. He's just a lovely person, sincere and honest. He's more of a gentleman than Bentley Drummle is, who is a gentleman in terms of the class of that time. Bentley Drummle's a horrible pig. And it's kind of like Pip's dissatisfaction is kind of maybe that he doesn't ever like understand that. He doesn't ever get to the point where he translates it into his own language. I love that. You know what? That little bit from that book, which I knew so well and still, you know, had, up until that point had known so well. That little bit from that book is worth so many other struggles through where you don't get it. Just that little takeaway is what I'm going to leave you with on this Friday afternoon, down by the sea in Whitstable, looking across the Thames estuary and trying not to get wet. Have a good weekend, everybody. See you later.